Hi, everybody. This is episode 70 of the Alfie Whattam Technology Podcast. Thank you all for coming back. As always, we are sponsored by welovealpha.com, the place to go if you're an engineering manager looking to scale and grow your team, whether you need React developers with mad front-end Picasso-like skills, or Java engineers with legit full-stack coding alien abilities, or .NET C# devs who are Microsoft all day and Microsoft all night. welovealpha.com is a place to go for your top talent. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Mr. Paul Graham. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Alfie. Great to be with you.
Thank you. And for the people watching, would you mind just giving us a quick intro into who you are and the company you work for and that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure, Alfie. My name is Paul Graham. I'm Director of UK Engineering for Matrix Software. I'm actually based in Ipswich in the UK. Matrix Software is a Silicon Valley-based company based over in the Bay Area. It's been up about 13 years, and it's in the mobile charging space. My history, I've been in the industry for 28 years. I was previously in a company called eServe Global, which we grew, and it got acquired by Oracle. My expertise is mobility, charging, and now I'm into 5G in cloud native. And that's what I talk on, and that's what I've been given recent presentations on.
Awesome. I've seen your presentations. They're really good. I'd recommend people search your name on LinkedIn and YouTube and check those out. It's definitely worth watching if you're interested in cloud and in 5G and that sort of thing. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us today. It'd be good to get your insights into what's happening in the world in these areas. So without further ado, really exciting article to begin with from our good friend, Mr. Elon Musk. So satellite to phone companies are thrilled about the SpaceX and T-Mobile partnership. They're getting calls from all kinds of carriers. So SpaceX, T-Mobile, they're coming together. They've got a vision. On Thursday, Elon Musk got on stage with the T-Mobile CEO, Mike Sievert, to announce that SpaceX is working with the carrier to completely eliminate cellular dead zones. The companies claim that the next generation Starlink satellites, set to launch next year, will be able to communicate directly with phones, letting you text, make calls, and potentially stream video even when there are no cell towers nearby. And what's more, Musk promised all of this is possible with phones that people are using today without consumers having to buy extra equipment. Obviously, pretty groundbreaking stuff in the world of kind of 5G and mobiles and that sort of thing. Mate, you're the expert when it comes to this sort of thing. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah. Alfie, this is a great one to discuss, right? It's in the news, satellites, 5G, how does that go together, right? The whole premise of 5G is like low latency, high bandwidth. But when you really read into these articles, right, it's like the T-Mobile, it's about messaging, right? It's about that kind of blank spots. It's not really talking about, between mass video between two spots, right? It's those areas where they can't get to. Actually, if you think of 5G, what are the use cases? Oh, it's high bandwidth. Yeah, okay, it's high bandwidth. It's mobile broadband, not really applicable in this case, but it's IoT and device density. Right now, it's a great one for that one, right? Because we talk about IoT devices, agriculture. That's one of the top ones for use case 5G. That's not about low latency or high bandwidth. That's about having loads of devices out somewhere, right? Now you can imagine somebody like a cattle farmer somewhere, right? Out in the plains, very poor connectivity, but he wants to monitor his cattle. They have his collars, they know where they are. That doesn't need low latency, that doesn't need high bandwidth, but it needs connectivity. I mean, these sort of things, that's a perfect use case, right? You have a 5G cell tower, goes up, connects to your low Earth orbiting satellites. Suddenly you've got connectivity where you hadn't had it before. Similarly, mountaineering, people are out in the wilderness. It gives these people the ability just to send messages, right? Okay, it does talk about video, but actually, video is about streaming, but there's also about, buffering, right? It doesn't do it really in real time. So we're not talking about real-time applications, right? We're talking about places where it needs some connectivity, like IoT, agriculture, up mountains, or where people need enough to get the data downloaded to them, right? Doesn't have to be high bandwidth, doesn't need low latency, but it needs to get there in the end. So these are perfect applications for it. And yeah, there are people who are going to say, oh yeah, the laws of physics, all that stuff. But think about the use cases, right? Think about IoT, think about just connectivity, and it's a perfect thing. And I'm reading about it this morning. What they're going to put in the phones is not about maybe streaming high bandwidth stuff. It's about sending emergency messages.
Yeah.
Perfect use case.
I can imagine if you're climbing a mountain and you fall and you break your leg, and prior you didn't have any service, and now you're able to send an emergency message. This could save lives. This could have a really
yeah, exactly. Read into these articles, right? People are dissing them, but they're not reading what they're about, right? It's about connectivity, but doesn't necessarily have to be low latency or high bandwidth, right? It's just having connectivity, and it's a perfect use case.
I saw that Musk moved a bunch of his satellites, and by the way, he has more satellites now than all other satellite providers in the world combined. He is the king of satellites, amongst other things. But I read about him, using them in the Ukraine war, to provide free coverage for people that didn't have access due to the war and things that were happening in that respect. So it's great to see him using his tech for the greater good in that respect, right?
Absolutely, and he does it in economies of scale, right? I mean, he does manufacturing. He manufactures his rockets, he manufactures cars, and he has these processes to bring it down and he has his reusable rockets, right? So he can bring the cost of launching and putting these satellites up to a minimal, and that's why he has so many up there, right? Yeah, he's got the internet process, and now he's going into telecoms. So we better watch out because he's coming after us, right?
I mean, PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, now telecoms, right? So,
but it's end-to-end thinking, right? That's what he's got. It's joined up. And what's after telecoms? Well, it's the services through telecoms, right? It's the things we talked about, IoT, like the connectivity, and those services behind the connectivity. So those are the next things he'll be going after.
Cool. That leads us nicely onto the next topic on the area of service. So Trump-backed Truth Social allegedly owes 1.6 million in unpaid hosting fees. There is Mr. Trump. So his conservative social media safe haven Truth Social is being accused by a vendor of non-payment of upwards of $1 million in hosting fees, according to a report from Fox Business on Thursday. The allegations come from RightForge, an internet infrastructure company and one of Truth Social's biggest vendors and creditors. If true, Fox Business reports, it would suggest that the social media platform's finances are in significant disarray. Like I mentioned to you earlier, Paul, not interested in your political opinions as much, but just from a tech perspective, what does this all mean?
What it means is, I've been in a mobile charging for years and prepaid, right? And we have these processes called dunning, and dunning is the way you manage debt collection, right? Now, if somebody owes you a debt for a service, you don't cut them off because you still want their business, and that's very aggressive, and then they'll come back to you, right? You've got to, over time, you sort of limit their service, you still let them use it, but then you've got to engage with them and recover that debt. Okay. And it's like any debt recovery, right? It's a two-way thing. You want to help them. Cutting off their service would mean you'll probably not get your debt because their service goes, right? Completely go. They need to work with them in some way to help them build their service up again, recover the funds and pay your debt. So one of the processes is called dunning, where you notify them about, you need to pay your debt on this certain time over a period, but you also need to collaborate with them. They're using your services after all, right? They're using your hosting. And maybe your model isn't set up properly, right? Maybe you need to work with them, and I think we'll see a lot of that in the future. I think AWS does the same sort of. If you have a debt, you've got to work with that organization that owes you the money, right? And figure out how you're both going to work together to recover the debt and help their business, right? It never helps anybody just to cut them off or whatever, right? But that's the nature of debt collection, and when you're working together in collaboration.
Yeah, could they, if they wanted to, could they just turn off their app? I mean, does it work that way, given that they're the
Yeah,
provider?
but they can go somewhere else, can't they? I mean, it's a domain name and an app.
Yeah,
The hosting service is the back end, and they can move it somewhere else if they want to and carry on. I mean, that
yeah.
does you no good at all, does it? I mean, they're going to count somewhere else. You're better off working with them.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. They picked that infrastructure provider presumably because during the months when Trump was suddenly banned from everything, a lot of the hosting platforms also banned. They banned him as well. So I think the reason I've gone with that particular company is because it's not AWS or Azure or Google Cloud where they're being banned from. It's kind of interesting to see how much power in that respect these big cloud companies can wield, and when it comes to that. If you're somebody, and you've got a platform and you're banned from them, what would happen? Like, are you in?
Why do you need cloud providers in the first place? Because it's a convenient way of hosting your service, right? It's
Sure.
not the only way. I mean, if you can't get a host service, then you can go and buy yourself some servers and put yourself on the internet where you go, right? It's not the end of the world. I mean, yeah, we go with the cloud because it's the most convenient way of managing services, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's economy of scale. AWS have the underlying infrastructure, and they have goods infrastructure which you can use, and all the services go on top. All those services on top don't have to reinvent the infrastructure that AWS has for you. But there's nothing stopping you building your own infrastructure, right? I mean, cloud native things like Kubernetes.
Yeah.
People think it's hosted. It doesn't have to be hosted. It can be on your own servers. You can have an on-prem Kubernetes and cloud native. So that's the point, right? I mean, cloud hosting is very convenient, right? It turns capex into opex, but it's not the end of the world. If you can't have it, you can build up your own, and you never know. By doing it yourself, you might build your own hosting service and sell it to other people, right? So.
From like a market share perspective, obviously AWS is the giant. Azure has got pretty good market share as well. Google Cloud is pretty small.
Yeah.
Then you've got a million tiny ones. Do you ever see in the distant future AWS being in trouble by some other upcoming cloud provider? Could it happen, or are they too powerful at this point, do you think?
I can't predict the future, right? If we'd say 20 years ago that a bookseller was now the dominant player in cloud hosting, you'd be laughed out the room, right? But that's the case. So who's going to be coming next? We don't know. As we said, it's probably somebody who wants some kind of hosting service they can't buy themselves or acquire, building it in their garage on servers, and then deploying it for other people.
Yeah.
Right. We can't foresee that, right?
Better, cheaper, faster. It's always
we can't foresee that. Technology moves so quickly. We cannot see the next trend in this area. Right?
Yeah,
These companies have it at the moment, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, like, you said it was started at a bookstore. The CEO currently of Amazon was the chap that built AWS, and obviously that's become the largest part of the entire group and the business. So it's crazy
because he needed his online service, e-commerce service, to be on some kind of platform, and he built the platform and identified that others needed this platform as well. That's how it came about.
Oh, it's a no-brainer, right? Build them side by side. I mean, one of them needs the other one, and vice versa. Yeah. Okay, on the topic of AWS Azure Cloud, final news story is all about Microsoft. It's all about Amazon. They've had to cancel several new data centers. Plans for island data center facilities have been shelved. So proposed new data centers for Amazon, for Microsoft in Ireland have been blocked amid concerns surrounding power shortages and supplies. Obviously, we know what's happening in the world when it comes to this area. So Amazon were looking to invest up to $2 billion in a bid to expand its data center operations in Ireland, which has become a key location for data handling facilities due to its proximity to Europe and North America. And I'm pretty sure the tax in Ireland might have a role to play in that as well. However, the Times have now reported that these new connections, that it's not going to happen. It's on hold. AWS to Microsoft Azure sites have been effective. It's all happening. What's your take on this, Paul?
Yeah, as you say, it's probably a balance of energy. Data centers are intensive, right? people no longer subscribing to certain services. How many of us during COVID lockdowns were sat at home subscribing to every possible streaming service possible, and now having to cut back because of the cost of living, right? This has a knock-on effect. Services, online services aren't used as much anymore. The subscriptions rates are coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a knock-on effect, right, on the hosting, and I'm sure it's impacted here.
I mean,
There's a direct correlation between things like, yeah, how much money somebody has to spend on free things,
yeah.
that spare cash, subscription services, and the amount of data centers and things like that required, right? Yeah, and energy going up as well. Yeah, it's going to cost a lot more to run these places.
The energy
Like that.
part's interesting, right? Because it's crazy to see that the whole cost of living thing. It's not just affecting the average person, but the biggest companies in the world are taking that into consideration when making their decisions.
Absolutely, there's a knock-on effect, right? I mean, it's just not us at home keeping ourselves warm. It's the manufacturing processes, travel, airline travel, all that sort of thing, right? Then it increases at the cost of our goods, the services we buy. We can't buy as many. Then it goes back into the economy, and the economy shrinks.
Yeah,
and that's what happens. And the shrinking back of the data centers is directly related to the bigger economic issues.
yeah. One of the most common, I suppose, layperson questions when it comes to these data centers is obviously, it's a great idea for companies to do. It's cheaper. It can be scalable. It's rather than you hosting it, keeping it in your office. You can outsource it. What would happen if there was some horrific event with one of these data centers where some natural disaster or some power outage and it shut it down to a massive large facility? Do these companies have backups on backups to prevent this sort of thing?
Yeah, they're professional. Like, they have backups on backups. Like, no doubt about it. Your data is safe. That's what their business is based on, right?
Yeah.
Your data is safe in these places. Absolutely, without no doubt about that.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll be backing up between the data centers, and the way these things work, you're not just dumping your data on the one disk in a data center, right? The information is spread off across disks and centers and everything else, right? Highly high availability on the storage.
Is that typically the case as well for the smaller providers, like the example that Trump was using?
I don't know, but I assume so, right? I mean, everybody has their own processes in place, right, to copy data. So yeah, I'm sure it is. I can't speak for them, right? I'm in telecoms. We are absolutely, we are high availability services that are the very heart of everything we do is based on high availability and not losing data, right? That's the fundamental. We run on something called the 5 nines. That's, basically your service is always available. We're managing client data. In charging space, we're managing money, basically, accounts.
Yeah.
Everything is, it's backups on resilience, right? Without doubt. And actually, if you do it in a smaller provider, you're probably more aware, I'd say. You'll probably check in more. If you go with AWS, based on their reputation, you're probably going to rely on what they give you, right? But, these are professionals. That's what they offer, right? So without a doubt, it's resilient.
It's crazy to see how valuable the data that they are hosting and storing has become. Data has become the new oil, or even worth more than oil, for the lack of a better word. I mean, just a decade ago, that was would that have been like the common thought in terms of that would have been a thing? But it is. That's the reality of the situation.
But imagine storing your family photos on one of these places and losing the whole lot, right? I mean, that's a big deal, right? It's these kind of things that's important to us.
Yeah.
And, we almost all of us must take into consideration backups and the integrity of data storage.
Yeah. Yeah, I've recently done it in a much smaller example, but password managing apps, for example. I had been
Yeah.
using one for years and years, and I remember one password, and that gives me access to all of my passwords, hundreds of them on an app. But I came to the realization that if something happened with that site, I'm in trouble if that data
Yeah.
was lost. So having a backup of that just seemed like a sensible thing to do, right? Never trusting a company completely with that type of information and that amount of data.
I go all the way back to, like 25, 30 years of using computers where it's in my mindset to copy things, right? I would not do something without making sure my data is backed up. Absolutely not. You know, my personal data is across things, physical disks, all the rest of it, right? Backed up, put somewhere else. You've got to take your own responsibility on your own data.
Yeah, you see it with like social media, like people that spend years and thousands, if not millions, creating amazing content, and then boom, account gets closed or they get hacked
Yeah.
or something, and then that's all lost. So I've got into the habit of storing everything on Google Drive and even on OneDrive, and these are small examples, but seems like a common sense thing to do, really.
Absolutely, right. Put it on a physical drive, give it to a family member, have that kind of resilience.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Paul. It was good to get your opinion, your insights, your perspective into what's happening in the world and in these topics. I'm sure if people have got questions on 5G, on cloud, on the data, that they can reach out to you on LinkedIn and get your opinion and that sort of thing. So thanks very much for coming on the show. It'd be good to speak to you again, perhaps in a few months when there's some new news in these areas. That would be a good idea. And thanks to everybody for watching as well.
Absolutely, Alfie. It's been great speaking to you. Hope to speak to you again in the future.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you.